Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American republic?
Hello everybody, it is April the 18th, 2025, a Friday. I'm thrilled today that we have one of my favorite guests back on the show. I call her the Cassandra of St. Louis, Sarah Kendzior. Many of you know her from her first book, which was a huge success. All her books have done very well. The View from Flyover Country. She was warning us about Trump and Trumpism and MAGA. She was first on our show in 2020, talking about media in the age of Trump. She had another book out then, Hiding in Plain Sight, The Invention of Donald Trump and the Erosion of America. And then in 2022, she came back on the show to talk about how a culture of conspiracy is keeping America simultaneously complacent and paranoid. The book was called, or is called, They Knew. Another big success. And now Sarah has a new book out. It's called The Last American Road Trip. It's a beautifully written book, a kind of memoir, but a political one, of course, which one would expect from Sarah Kendzior. And I'm thrilled, as I said, that the Cassandra of St. Louis is joining us from St. Louis. Sarah, congratulations on the new book.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me back on.
Well, it's an honor. So these four books, how does The Last American Road Trip, in terms of the narrative of your previous three hits, how does it fit in? Why did you write it?
Well, this book kind of pivots off the epilogue of Hiding in Plain Sight. And that was a book about political corruption in the United States and the rise of Trump. But in the epilogue, I describe how I was trying as a mom to show my kids America in the case that it ended due to both political turmoil and corruption and also climate change. I wanted them to see things themselves. So I was driving them around the country to national parks, historic sites, etc. And so many people responded so passionately to that little section, especially parents really struggling on how to raise children in this America, that I ended up writing a book that covers 2016 to 2024 and my attempts to show my children everything I could in the time that we had. And, as this happens, my children went from relatively young kids to, teenagers. My daughter's almost an adult. And so it kind of captures America during this time period. It's also just a travelogue, a road trip book, a memoir. It's a lot of things at once.
Yeah, got great review from Ms. Magazine, comparing you with the great road writers, Kerouac, of course, and Steinbeck. But Kerouac and Steinbeck, certainly Kerouac was very much of a solitary male. Is there a female quality to this book? As you say, it's a book as much about your kids and the promise of America as it is about yourself.
Yeah, I think there is, in that, I have a section actually about the doomed female road trip where it's, Thelma and Louise or Janet Bates and Psycho, or even songs about, being on the road and on the run that are written by women, like Merle Haggard's I'm a Lonesome Fugitive, had to be sung by men to convey that quality. And there aren't a lot of, mom on the road with her husband and kids kind of books. That said, I think of it as a family book, a parenting book. I certainly think men would like it just as much as women would, and people without kids would like it just as much as people with kids, although it does seem to strike a special resonance with families struggling with a lot of the same issues that I do.
It's all about the allure of historic Route 66. I've been on that. Anyone who's driven across the country has. You explain that it's a compilation of 4 long trips across Route 66 in 1998, 2007, 2017, and 20 23. That's almost 40 years, Sarah. Sorry, 30. What, 25?
Giving away
My
my
math
age
isn't
there,
very good.
Andrew.
Yeah, my math isn't very good. I mean, how has Route 66 and, of course, America changed in that period? I know that's a rather leading question.
No, I mean, I devote quite a lot of the book to Route 66, in part because I live on it. It goes right through St. Louis. So, I see it just every day. I'll be casually grocery shopping and then be informed I'm on historic Route 66 all of a sudden. But, it's a road that is, once was the great kind of romanticized road of escape and travel. It was decommissioned, notably, by Ronald Reagan after the creation of the interstate. And now it's just a series of rural roads, frontage roads, roads that end abruptly, roads that have gone into ruin, roads that are in some really beautiful places in terms of the landscape. So it really is this conglomeration of all of America, of the decay and the destruction and the abandonment in particular, but also people's, their own memories, their own artistic works, roadside shrines and creations that are often, pretty offbeat that they've put to show, this is what I think of our country. These are my values. This is what I think is important. So it's a very interesting journey to take. It's often one I'm kind of inadvertently on just because of where I live and the direction I go, will mirror it. So I kept passing these sites again and again. I didn't set out to write this book. Obviously, when I first drove it when I was 19, I didn't know that this was our future. But looking back, especially at technological change, at how we travel, at how we trust each other, at all of these things that have happened to this country since this time, it's really something. And that road will bring back all of those memories of what was lost and what remains to be lost. And of course, it's hitting its 100th anniversary next year. So I'm guessing there'll be a lot of, reminiscing about Route 66.
It's a book about memories. You write about that. Eventually, even your memory will just, or this experience of this trip will just be a memory. What does that suggest about contextualizing the current moment in American history? It's too easy to over-dramatize it, or perhaps it's hard not to over-dramatize it given what's happening. I want to talk about a little bit about that and your take on America on April the 18th, 2025. But how does that make sense of a memorial when you know that even your memories will become memories?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk frankly about what's happening in America now without it sounding over dramatic or hyperbolic, which I think is why so many people were reluctant to believe me over my last decade of warnings that the current crises and catastrophes that we're experiencing are coming, are possible, and need to be actively stopped. I don't think they were inevitable, but they needed to be stopped by people in charge who refused to do it. And so, my reaction to this, as a writer, but just as a human being, is to write everything down, is to keep an ongoing record, not only of what I witness now, but of what I know of our history, of what my own values are, of what my place in the world is. And back in 2016, I encouraged everyone to do this because I knew that over the next decade, people would be told to accept things that they would normally never accept, to believe things that they would normally never believe. And if you write down where you stand, you always have that point of reference to look back towards. It doesn't have to be for publication. It doesn't have to be for the outside world. It can just be for yourself. And so I think that that's important. But, right now, I think everyone has a role to play in battling what is an authoritarian kleptocracy and preventing it from hurting people. And I think people should lean into what they do best. And what I do best is write and research and document. And so that's what I'm going to continue to do, particularly as history itself is under assault by this government.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about you, Sarah, is that you have an unusual background. You got a PhD in Soviet studies, late Soviet studies.
Anthropology, yeah, but that was my focus.
Yeah, but your dissertation was on the Uzbek opposition in exile. I wonder whether that experience of studying the late Soviet Union and its disintegration equipped you in some ways better than a lot of domestic American political analysts and writers for what's happening in America today. We've done a number of shows with people like Pete Wehner, who I'm sure you know his work from The Atlantic and New York Times, about learning from East European resistance writers, brave people like Milan Kundera, of course, Václav Havel, Solzhenitsyn. Do you think your earlier history of studying the Soviet Union helped you prepare, at least mentally, intellectually, for what's happening in the United States?
Oh, absolutely. I think it was essential because there are all sorts of different types of authoritarianism. And the type that Trump and his backers have always pursued was that of a mafia state, of a kleptocracy. And Uzbekistan is the country that I knew the most. And actually, what I wrote my dissertation about, this is between 2006 and 2012, was the fact that after a massacre of civilians, a lot of Uzbekistan's journalists, activists, political figures, opposition figures, etc., went into exile. And then they immediately started writing blogs. And so for the very first time, they had freedom of speech. They had never had it in Uzbekistan. And they start revealing the whole, secret history of Uzbekistan and everything going on and trying to, work with each other, try to sort of have some impact on the political process in Uzbekistan. And they lost. What happened was the dictator died. Islam Karimov died in 2016 and was replaced by another dictator who's not quite as severe. But, watching the losing side and also watching people persevere and hold on to themselves and continue working despite that loss, I think was very influential. Because you could look at, Václav Havel or Lech Walesa or, other sort of people who won, from Eastern Europe, from the revolutions of 1989 and so forth. And it's inspiring. But sometimes I think it's really important to look at the people who did not succeed, but kept going anyway. They didn't surrender themselves. They didn't surrender their morality and they didn't abandon their fellow man. And I think that that's important. And also just to sort of get at the heart of your question, yes, the structure of it, oligarchs who shake down countries, strip them and sell them for parts, mine them for resources, that model, especially of what happened to Russia, actually, in particular in the 1990s, of these oligarch wars, is what I see as the future of the United States right now. That is what they're trying to emulate.
Yeah, we did a show with Steve Hansen and Jeff Kopstein, both political scientists, on what they see. They co-wrote a book on patrimonialism. This is the model they see. They're both Max Weber scholars, so they borrow from that historic sociological analysis. And Kopstein was on the show with John Rausch as well, talking about this patrimonialism. So do you share the Kopstein, Hansen, Rausch analysis? Rausch wrote a piece in The Atlantic about this too, which did very well. But this isn't conventional fascism or communism. It's a kind of 21st century version of patrimonialism.
It's definitely not traditional fascism. And one of the main reasons for that is a fascist has loyalty to the state. They seek to embody the state. They seek to expand the state. Recently, Trump has been doing this more traditional route somewhat, things like wanting to buy Greenland. But I think a lot of what he's doing is in reaction to climate change. And also, by the way, I don't think Trump is the mastermind or originator of any of these geopolitical designs. He has a team. We know about some of them with the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025. We know he has foreign advisors. And again, Trump is a corporate raider. That is how he led his business life. He's a mafia associate who wants to strip things down and sell them for parts. And that's what they want to do with the United States. And that's, yes, there are fascist tactics. There are fascist rhetoric. There are a lot of things that this country will, unfortunately, and has in common, with, say, Nazi Germany, although it's also notable that, of course, Nazi Germany borrowed from a lot of the tactics of Jim Crow, slavery, genocide of Native Americans. This has always been a back and forth, and America always has had some form of selective autocracy. But yeah, I think the folks who try to make this direct line and make it seem like the 20th century is just simply being revived, I've always felt like they were off, because there's no interest for these plutocrats in the United States even existing as a sovereign body. Like it truly doesn't matter to them if all of our institutions, even something as benign as the postal service, collapse. That's actually beneficial for them because then they can privatize, they can mine resources, they can make money for themselves. And I really worry that their goal is partition, is to take this country and to split it into smaller pieces that are easier to control. And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, that I wrote The Last American Road Trip, because I don't want people to fall for traps about generalizations or stereotypes about different regions of this country. I want them to see it as a whole, and that our struggles are interconnected and we have a better chance of winning if we stand by each other.
Yeah, and your book, in particular, The View from Flyover Country, was so important because it wasn't written from San Francisco or Los Angeles or DC or New York. It was written from St. Louis. So in a way, Sarah, you're presenting Trump as the ultimate Hayekian bastard. There's a new book out by Quinn Slobodian called Hayek's Bastards, which connect Trumpianism and MAGA with neoliberalism. You don't see a break. We've done a lot of shows on the rise and fall of neoliberalism. You don't see a break between Hayek and Trump?
I think that in terms of neoliberalism, I think that it's a continuation of it. And people who think that our crises began with Trump becoming the president in 2017, entering office, are deluded, because the pathway to Trump even being able to run for president, given that, he was first investigated by the Department of Justice in 1973 and then was linked to a number of criminal enterprises for decades after, that he was able to get in that position, that already showed that we had collapsed in certain respects. And so I think that these are tied together. This has a lot to do with greed, with a disregard for sovereignty, a disregard for human rights, for all of this. And Trump has always served much better as a demagogue, a front man, a figurehead. I do think, he's a lot smarter than many of his opponents give him credit for. He is very good at doing what he needs to do and knowing what he needs to know and nothing more. The rest he gives to the bureaucrats, to the lawyers, etc. But he fills this persona, and I do wonder what will happen when he is gone, because they've tried very hard to find a successor, and it's always failed, like DeSantis or Nikki Haley or whoever. And I kind of wonder if one of the reasons things are moving so fast now is they're trying to get a lot of things in under the wire while he's still alive, because I don't think that there's any individual who people have the loyalty to. His cult is not that big. It's a relatively small segment of the country, but it is very intense and very loyal to him. I don't think that loyalty is transferable.
Is there anything, I presented you as the Cassandra from St. Louis. You've seen the future probably clearer than most other people. Certainly, when I first came across your work, I wasn't particularly convinced. I'm much more convinced now. You were right, I was wrong. Is there anything about Trump, too, that surprised you? I mean, any of the cruelty, the open corruption, the anger, the hostility, the attempt to destroy anything of any value in America, the fact that they seem to take such great pleasure in destroying this country's most valuable things?
Yeah, it's extremely sad. And no, he doesn't surprise me at all. He's been the same guy since I was a little kid. He was a plot line on children's television shows in the 1980s, where as a child, I was supposed to know that the name Trump was synonymous with corruption, with being a tax cheat, with being a liar. These were just sort of cultural codes that I was expected to know. What surprised me more is that no one stopped him because this threat was incredibly obvious, and that so many people in power have joined in. And I'm assuming they're joining in because they would rather be on the side with all that power than be a target of that power, but that they feel apparently no sense of loss, no sense of grief for things like the loss of national parks, public education, the postal service, things that most folks like, Social Security for your elderly parents. Most Americans want these things. And most Americans, regardless of political party, don't want to see our country torn apart in this fashion. And so I'm not surprised by Trump. I'm surprised at the extent of his enablers, at the complicity of the press and of the FBI and other institutions. And, it's also been very jarring to watch how open they are this time around. Things like Elon Musk and his operation taking out classified information. The thing is I'm pretty sure Trump did all that. I mean, we know Trump did this in his first term, and they would emphasize things like this box of physical written documents in Mar-a-Lago illegally taken. But, my mind always just went to, well, what did they do digitally? Because that seems much easier and much more obvious. What did they do with all of these state secrets that they had access to for 4 years? What kind of leverage would that give them? And I think now they're just they're not bothering to hide anything anymore. I think they set the stage, and now, we're in the midst of the most horrible play, the most horrible performance ever. And it's, it can be soul crushing at times.
And of course, the real question is whether we're in the last act. Your book, The Last American Road Trip, was mostly written, in 2024 from
2023, mostly.
2023. So, I don't know if you can answer this, Sarah, but you know as much about Middle America and Middle Americans as anyone. I mean, you're on the road, you talk to everyone, you have a huge following, both on the left and the right in some ways. Some of your books now, you told me before we went live, some of your previous books, like Hiding in Plain Sight, suddenly become a big hit amongst conservative Americans. What does Trump or the MAGA people around him, what do they have to do to lose the support of ordinary Americans? As you say, they're destroying the essential infrastructure, medical, educational, the roads, the railways, everything is being destroyed, carted off, almost like Stalin carted off half of the Soviet Union back into Asia during the Second World War. What does he have to do to lose the support of Middle America?
I mean, I don't think Middle America, by which, like, a giant swath of the country that's just ideologically diverse, demographically diverse, supports him. I mean, some do, certainly. He's got some hardcore acolytes. I think most people are disillusioned with the entire political system. They are deeply frustrated by Trump. They were deeply frustrated by Biden. They're struggling to pay bills. They're struggling to hold on to basic human rights. And they're mad that their leverage is gone. People voted in record numbers in 2020. They protested in record numbers throughout Trump's first term. They've made their concerns known for a very long time. And there are just very few officials really listening or responding. And I think that initially, when Trump re-entered the picture, it caused folks to just check out mentally because it was too overwhelming. I think it's why voter turnout was lower, because, the Democrats, when they won, didn't make good on their promises. Like, it's a very simple thing. If you follow through with your campaign platform that was popular, then you're going to retain those voters. If you don't, you may lose them, especially when you're up against a very effective demagogue who has a way with rhetoric. And so we're just in such a bad place, such a painful place. I don't think people will look to politicians to solve their problems, and with very good reason. I'm hoping that there are more of a sense of community support, more of a sense that we're all in this together, especially as financially things begin to fall apart. Trump said openly in 2014 that he intended to crash the American economy. He said this on a Fox News clip that I found in 2016 because it was being reprinted all over Russian language media. They loved this clip because it also praised Putin and so forth. And I was astounded by it. I was like, why in the world isn't this all over every TV station, every radio station? Like, he's laying out the whole plan, and now he's following that plan. And so I'm very concerned about that. And I just hope people, in times like this, traditionally, this opens the door to fascism. People become extremely afraid, and in their fear, they want a scapegoat. They are full of rage. They take it out on each other. That is the worst possible move right now from both a moral or a strategic view. People need to protect each other, to respect each other as fully human, to recognize almost everyone here, except for a little tiny group of corrupt billionaires, is a victim in this scenario. And so I don't see a big big difference between, myself and wherever I go. I was in Tulsa yesterday. I was in San Francisco last week. Like, we're all in this together, and I see a lot of heartache wherever I go. And so if people can, lend each other support, that is the best way to get through this.
Are you suggesting then that he was is the Manchurian candidate? Why did he say that in 2014?
Well, it was interesting. He was on Fox. It was during the Sochi Olympics, and he was talking about how he speaks with Putin every day. They're pals, and that Putin is going to produce a really big win for us, and we're all going to be very happy about it. And then he went on to say that the crashing of the economy and riots throughout America is what will make America great again. And this is in February 2014. Fox has deleted the clip, but other people have copies, so it's also in my book, Hiding in Plain Sight, the transcript of that. I'm not sure, like, a Manchurian candidate almost feels, like the person would have to be blackmailed or coerced or brainwashed somehow to participate. I think Trump is a true volunteer, and his loyalty isn't to Russia per se. His loyalty is to his bank accounts. Like, his loyalty is to power. And one thing he's been after his whole life was immunity from prosecution, because he has been involved or adjacent to such an enormous number of crimes. And then when the Supreme Court granted him that, he got what he wanted, and he's not afraid of, breaking the law in any way. He's doing what all autocrats do, which is rewrite the law so that he is no longer breaking it. And he has a team of lawyers who help him in that agenda. So I feel like, on one sense, he's very all-American. It's kind of a sad thing that, as he destroys America, he's doing it in a very American way. He plays a lot of great American music at his rallies. He has a vernacular that I can relate to that and understand it, while detesting everything he's doing and all of his horrific policies. But what they want to turn us into, though, I think, is something that all Americans just won't recognize. And we've had this slipping away of a kind of unified American culture for a while. I think because we've lost our pop culture, which is really where a lot of people would bond. Movies, music, all of it became split into streaming services. All of it became bifurcated. People stopped seeing each other as much face to face, during COVID. And then that became kind of a permanent thing. We're very fragmented, and that hurts us badly. And all we've kind of got left is, I guess, sports and then politics. So people take all the effort that they used to put into devouring American pop culture or American civic life, and they put it into this kind of politics that the media presents as if it's a game, like, initially a horse race during the election, and now, like, ooh, will the evil dictator win? It's like, this is our lives. Like, we have a lot on the line. So I wish they would take their job more seriously too. Of course, they're up paywalled and on streaming sites, so who's watching anyway? But still, it is a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about this death wish. You mentioned Thelma and Louise earlier, one of the great movies, American road movies. Maybe in an odd way, the final scene of the Trump movie will be similar to you seem to be suggesting. I'm not going to give away the end of Thelma and Louise to anyone who's watching who hasn't seen it. You do need to see it. Similar ending to that movie. What about, you've talked about resistance, Sarah. You're one of the most influential, I guess, resistors to Trump and Trumpism. You put up an X earlier this month about the duty of journalism to resist, the duty of thinkers to resist. Some people are leaving, guys like Tim Snyder, his wife Marcy Shore, Jason Stanley, another expert on fascism. You've made it clear that you're staying. What's your take on people like Snyder who are leaving this country?
Well, from what I know, he made a statement saying he had decided to move to Canada before Trump was put in office. Jason Stanley, on the other hand, explicitly said he's moving there because Trump is in office. And my first thought when I heard about all of them was, Well, what about their students? Like, what about all these students who are being targeted by ICE, who are being deported? What about their TAs? What about everyone who's in a more vulnerable position? When you have a position of power and influence, you could potentially do a lot of good in helping people. I respect everyone's decision to live wherever they want. Like, it's not my business. But I do think that if you have that kind of chance to do something powerful for the community around you, especially the most vulnerable people in it, who at this time are, green card holders, people here on visas. We're watching this horrific crackdown at all these universities. My natural inclination would be to stay and take a stand and not abandon them. And I guess, people, they do things in different ways, or they may have their own personal concerns, and, that's fine. I just know, I'm not leaving. Like, I've got elderly parents and in-laws. I've got, relatives who need me. I have a lot of people who depend on me, and they depend on me in St. Louis and in Missouri, because there aren't that many journalists in St. Louis. I think there could be. There are a lot of great writers in St. Louis, who have given it a chance, given a platform, could really show you what it's actually like here instead of all these stereotypes. But we're always marginalized. Like, even I'm marginalized, and I think I'm, probably the most well-known in terms of being a political commentator. And so I feel like it's important to stand my ground, but also, I love this state and this city, and I love my community, and I can't fathom, leaving people in the lurch at a time like this when I'm doing better. I'm on more solid ground, despite being a target of various, organizations and individuals. I'm on a more solid ground than somebody who's a Black American or an immigrant or impoverished. Like, I feel like it is my job to stand up for, folks here and let everyone know, what's going on, and be somebody who they can come to and feel like that's safe.
You describe yourself, Sarah, as a target. Your books have done very well. Most of them have been bestsellers. I'm sure The Last American Road Trip will do very well.
It is a bestseller as of yesterday.
Yeah,
and the USA Today bestseller list. So yeah.
Excellent. So that's good news. You've been on the road. You've had hundreds of people show up. I know you wrote about signing 600 books at Left Bank Books, which is remarkable. Most writers would cut off both hands for that. How are you being targeted? You noted that some of your books are being taken. Are they being taken off the shelves? Are they being banned or discouraged?
Basically, what's been happening is kind of akin to what you see with universities. I just think it's not as well publicized or publicized at all, where there's not some sort of, like the places will give in to what they think this administration wants before they are outright told to do it. So yes, there was an attempt to remove Hiding in Plain Sight from circulation in 2024 to make the paperback, and which at the time was ranked on Amazon at number 2000. It was extremely popular because this was the week that the Supreme Court gave Trump immunity. I was on vacation when I found out it was being pulled out of circulation, and I was in rural New Mexico, and I had to get to a place with Wi-Fi to try to fight back for my book, which was a bestseller, a recent publication. It was very strange to me, and I won that fight. They put it back, but a lot of people had tried to order it at that time and didn't get it, and a lot of people try to get my other books, and they just can't get them. So the publisher always has a warehouse issue or a shipping problem, and this kind of comes up, or people they've noticed this since 2020. I don't get reviewed in the normal kind of place as a person that has best-selling books one after another would get reviewed. So that kind of thing is more of a pain. I always was able to circumvent it before through social media. But since Musk took over Twitter, and because of the way algorithms work, it's more and more difficult for me to manage all of the publicity and PR and whatnot on my own. And so, I'm grateful that you're having me on your show. I'm also grateful that, Flatiron did give me a book tour. That's helped tremendously. But there's that. And then there's also just the constant death threats and threats of, other things, things happening to people I love. And it's been scary. And I get used to it and that I expect it, but you never could really get used to people constantly telling you that they're gonna kill you.
Do
And
you
I just
go
get
to,
used
when
to
you
it.
get death threats, do you go to the authorities? Have they responded?
No, there's no point. I mean, I have before, and it was completely pointless. And I'll just mostly just go to people I know who I trust to see if they can check in on things. I have to be very vague here. Who are not in the government or in the police or anything like that. I don't think anyone would protect me. I really just don't think anyone would help. One thing is, yes, I'm a prominent critic of Trump and his administration, but I was also a prominent critic of the DOJ and Merrick Garland for not doing anything about all of these threats, and also a critic of Biden and the Democrats for not impeaching quickly, for not being more proactive, for not acting with greater urgency. So I'm targeted by kind of everyone except for people who don't have any power, which is a strange situation to be in, because I love my readers and I think that they're wonderful, and I'm incredibly grateful for them because my books largely spread through word of mouth. But it is scary for me, just as like a mom in Missouri without a lot of resources, to be targeted by all of these kind of high profile, wealthy, powerful people. But all I have is my voice and my writing, and so I just do what I can, and that's just the way the cards have been dealt for me, and it is what it is. So
when later historians write about this period in 50 or 100 years' time, how do you think, you mentioned the Biden administration, you were critical of them. We haven't talked about Kamala Harris's failed presidential attempt, which I wasn't particularly impressed with. How much moral responsibility do you think that Biden and Harris should be accused of for Trump too?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'll be delighted if we have historians in the future.
Well, there will be, even if they're not in America, they'll be somewhere.
I was worried it'll be some sort of AI creation that just, belches out "Make America Great Again," like, like in The Shining or something, just over and over and over again. But assuming we have real historians that actually assess the situation, I think they are going to be tremendously critical of the Biden administration. I think it may, in fact, go down as one of the worst of all time. And he will be seen as a Neville Chamberlain-like figure who had the opportunity to stop or slow a number of autocratic practices and either chose to look the other way or to enable them. Because the thing is in 2016, people were very doubtful that America could become an autocratic state. They hadn't seen this before. A lot of this was new to them. From 2016 through 2021, we saw all that Trump was capable of, and he committed a large multitude of crimes. And those crimes, he, not just him, but his cohort were never held accountable. And what they did during the Biden years was plan all of their next moves. Like, you don't suddenly have a gulag for Americans in El Salvador, like just off the top of your head. All of this takes planning. We knew about a lot of the plans. The Democrats campaigned about combating Project 2025. And my question to them was, well, what if you lose? How are you going to combat it then? What if he gets back? What are you going to do? They would be so offended. They're like, how dare you question us? How dare you question, our plans? I'm like, well, you don't have a plan. Like, that's my question, is what is the plan? And they didn't. And they could have spent those 4 years creating a bulwark against a lot of the most horrific policies that we're seeing now. Instead, they're kind of reacting on the fly, if they're even reacting at all. And meanwhile, people are being targeted, deported, detained. They're suffering tremendously, and they're very, very scared. And I think it's very scary to have a total dearth of leadership from where the not just the opposition, but just people with basic respect for the Constitution, our civil rights, et cetera, are supposed to be.
Yeah, you mentioned Project 2025. We've got David Graham on the show next week, who's written a book about Project 2025. Is there anything positive to report, Sarah? I mean, some people are encouraged by the behavior, at least on Friday, the 18th of April. Who knows what will happen over the weekend or next week? Behavior of Harvard. Some law firms are aggressively defending their rights. Should we be encouraged by the universities, law firms, even some corporate leaders are beginning to mutter under their breath about Trump and Trumpism?
And it depends whether they actually have that power and wield it, or whether they're just sort of trying to tamper down public dissent. I'm skeptical of these universities and law firms, because I think they should have had a plan long ago, because I think it was very obvious that all of this was going to happen. And I feel so terribly for all of the students there that were abandoned by these administrations, especially places like Columbia, that gave in right away. What does hearten me, though, and as you said, I've been on this tour, like I was all over the West Coast, I've been all over the Midwest and the South, is, Americans do understand what's happening. There's always this this culture in media of like, how do we break it to Americans? Well, we know out here in Missouri that this is very bad. And I think that people have genuine concern for each other. I think they still have compassion for each other. I think there's a culture of cruelty that's promoted online, and it's incentivized. You can make money that way, you could get clicks that way, whatever. But in real life, I think people feel vulnerable, they feel afraid. But I've seen so much kindness, I've seen so much concern and determination from people who don't have very much. And maybe that's, why people don't know about it. These are just ordinary folks. And so I have great faith in American people to combat this. And what I don't have faith in is our institutions. And I hope that these sort of in-between places like universities, who do a lot of good on one hand, but also can kind of act as like hedge funds on the other hand, I hope that they move fully to the side of good, and that they purge themselves of these corrupt elements that have been within them for a long time, the more greedy aspects of their existence. I hope they see themselves as places that uphold civic life and history and provide, intellectual resistance and shelter for students in the storm. They could be a really powerful force if they choose to be. Like, it's never too late to change. I guess that's the message I want to bring home. Even if I'm very critical of these places, it's never too late for them to change and to do the right thing.
Well, finally, Sarah, a lot of people are going to be watching this on my Substack page. Your Substack page, your newsletter, They Knew, I think has, last count, 52,000 subscribers. Is this the new model for independent writers, journalists, thinkers like yourself? I'm not sure of those 52,000, how many of them are paid. You noted that your book has disappeared, coincidentally sometimes, so maybe some publishers are being intimidated. Is the future for independent thinkers platforms like Substack, where independent authors like yourself can establish direct intellectual and commercial relations with their readers and followers?
Yeah, it's certainly the present. I mean, this is the only place, or other newsletter outlets, I suppose, that I could go. And I purposefully divorced myself from all institutions except for my publisher, because I knew that this kind of corruption would inhibit me from being able to say the truth. This is why I dropped out of academia. I dropped out of regular journalism. Like, I have isolated myself to some degree on purpose. And I also just like being in control of this and having direct access to my readers. However, what does concern me is, Twitter used to also be a place where I had direct access to people. I could get my message out. I could circumvent a lot of the traditional modes of communication. Now I'm essentially shadow banned on there, along with a lot of people. And, Musk has basically banned Substack links because of his feud with Matt Taibbi. That led to, if you drop a Substack link in there, it just gets kind of submerged and people don't see it. So, I think about Twitter and how positive I was about that maybe like 12, 13 years ago. And I wonder how I'll feel about Substack and what will happen to it going forward, because clearly, Trump's camp realizes the utility of these platforms. Like, they know that a lot of people who are prominent anti-authoritarian voices are using them to get the word out when they lose their own platform at, like, say, the Washington Post or MSNBC or whatever network is corrupted or bullied. And so eventually I think they'll come for it. And, Substack has problems on its own anyway. So I am worried. I make up backups of everything. I encourage people to consume analog content and to print things out if they like them in this time. So get my book on that note. Brand new analog content for you. Nice.
Don't buy it digitally. I assume it's available on Kindle, but you're probably not too keen, or even on Amazon and Bezos. Finally, Sarah, this is Friday. Fridays are supposed to be cheerful days, the days before the weekend. Is there anything to be cheerful about on April the the 18th, 2025 in America?
I mean, yeah, there's things to be cheerful about, pre-spring, nice weather. I'm worried about this weekend. I'll just get this out real quick. This is basically militia Christmas. This is the anniversary of Waco, the Oklahoma City bombings, Columbine. It's Hitler's birthday. This is a time when traditionally American militia groups become enacted.
In other words, springtime in America.
Yeah, springtime for Hitler. And so I'm worried about this weekend. I'm worried that if there are anti-Trump protests, that they'll be infiltrated by people trying to stoke the very riots that Trump said he wanted in order to, quote, make America great again and have everything collapse. So everyone, please be very, very careful this weekend heading out, and just be aware of these dates, and the importance of these dates as far predates Trump to militia groups and other violent extremist groups.
Well, on that cheerful note, Sarah,
sorry,
I asked you for a positive note. You've ruined everyone's weekend, probably in a healthy way. You are the Cassandra from St. Louis. Appreciate your bravery and honesty in standing up to Trump and Trumpism, MAGA America. Congratulations on the new book, as you say. It's available in analog form. You can buy it, take it home, protect it, dig a hole in your garden, and protect it from the secret police. Congratulations on the new book. As I said to you before we went live, it's a beautifully written book. I mean, you're noted as a polemicist, but I thought this book is your best written book. The other books were well written, but this is particularly well written, very personal. So congratulations on that. And Sarah, we'll have to get you back on the show. I'm not sure how much worse things can get in America, but no doubt they will, and no doubt you will write about it. So keep well, keep safe, and keep doing your brave work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for your kind words and for having me on again.